And welcome back to week number 3. And just to do a quick review here. So far we've been covering things about the founding documents, from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution, and that 1 year between when the Constitution was signed and when it was finally ratified. There was the discussion or the debate between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, and it was that discussion and that debate over how much power should the federal government have versus the states. And again, that was even the people who were stronger federalists at that time, wanting stronger federal government, the federal government still was so small compared to what our federal government is today. That concept of two governments kind of working together, federal government and state government working together, is this concept of federalism, very unique to the United States. So again, I am a citizen of the United States. I am also a citizen of California. Two types of federalism. One is dual federalism, how we were founded, where most of the sovereignty, most of the power was at the state level, with a very few things that were allocated to the federal government. That lasted until about the 1930s, when we went into cooperative federalism, where the federal government got bigger and bigger till it is what it is today. That brings us from the late 1700s. Now we're trying to, in the early 1800s, staff these government departments, because we spent a lot of time crafting the Constitution and how government should be organized. We didn't give a lot of thought to how government should be run. So the way that government was run in the early 1800s were the elected officials who we elected chose the best people to run the departments, like the post office. And that didn't work out too well, because it ended up being something that Andrew Jackson coined as the spoils system. To the victor goes the spoils. And so people who were getting into these positions in government were people who were contributors, friends, family, that type of thing. That lasted until the 1883, when the Pendleton Act was passed. Excuse me, got a little cough. So when the Pendleton Act got passed in 1883, that was the beginning of us as public administrators. Followed on its heels, 1887, was Wilson's dichotomy. So on your flashcards that you're studying for the comp exam already, you should have Wilson's dichotomy, which is the politics administration dichotomy. You should know it was written in 1887, and it was called A Study of Administration. So make sure that these concepts, you're memorizing this, or just kind of internalizing it, and that you have a good, excuse me, you've got a good feel for the concepts. From the late 1800s, again, we're moving into the Industrial Revolution. Now Taylor comes about, Frederick Taylor, in 1912 with his Scientific Management, talking about the role of the manager and how managers should scientifically develop how tasks should be operated. They should, through trial and error, find the best tools, the best processes, the best people for the job. They should know how long everything should take. And so rather than, it feels good to do it this way, that everything is done scientifically from the manager's standpoint when they're developing these processes. Moving on as a review to Max Weber, which is the father of bureaucracy, and kind of what bureaucracy is, what are the elements of bureaucracy, this hierarchical kind of management style. Everybody is accountable. So the benefits of a Weberian bureaucracy is accountability, standardization and accountability, consistency. Not necessarily efficiency. It's not necessarily the fastest way, but people can be held accountable because everybody's authority is limited by the level above. Good now, when we're talking about Wilson's dichotomy, good now kind of goes hand in hand with Wilson, but kind of diverges from Wilson in that, if you read the end of Good Now's article, really focuses on, it may not be applicable or even preferred that the dichotomy is pure, that maybe there is or should be interaction between politics and administration. Then last week we talked about Mary Parker Follett, one of the few female voices in our industry, and saying, there's other ways to increase efficiency. There's other ways to manage, to get good product and to get fast product out of people. And maybe it's about power with rather than power over. So this reciprocal kind of relationship between management and staff. That if we care about them, if we empower them, then in turn they will produce better, faster, and that type of thing. While we're talking about this Weberian bureaucracy, I have a little video here which talks about the 6 characteristics of a bureaucracy. It's an okay video, but I would take the time, the 4.5 minutes or whatever, to watch this video, just to make sure you're really anchored to bureaucracy in its academic, the definition of that word academically, as opposed to what we kind of say, oh, that's just a bureaucratic organization, kind of meaning it's bad. But what are the true elements of a bureaucracy? This week we're going to focus on Gulick in 1937, Barnard, Merton, Simon, and Lindblom. Oh, one more thing. The Barnard article, possibly, if you have the latest edition, I think it's the 2016 edition of the Classics book, Barnard's article may be missing from that. Sometimes they have issues with copyrights depending on what edition you have. So if Barnard's article is missing, I have posted an article that will work for you in the resources section. But other than that, all the articles should be there. If by chance any edition that you have, because I know people have a lot of different editions right now, if you're missing anything and can't get it from a friend, let me know and we'll try to, just let me know what edition you have and that you're having trouble finding it. All right, let's go now to Gulick in 1937. So again, now in time, 1887 was Wilson's dichotomy. Then we're moving to 1912. We've got Taylor, and then Weber came next, and Mary Parker Follett. Now in the next decade, in 1937, Gulick is coming along and still kind of dovetailing with Taylor and Weber on what the manager is supposed to do, but taking it maybe to a more modern era of management. That he's saying what managers need to do is they need to plan and organize, staff, direct, coordinate, report, and budget. Those are the tasks managers have to do. Now, this isn't necessarily in conflict with Taylor. Taylor saying you have to plan out everything scientifically, but it's a little broader view of what managers have to do. For our purposes, as public administrators, we need to know the acronym POSCORB. And so we usually pronounce it without the D in there. We usually say POSCORB, but the D is in there if you can squeeze it in, POSCORB. That's the acronym, and it's a stupid acronym, and I can't believe they didn't try to spell something out of this. But the POSCORB stands for Planning, Organizing, Staffing, Directing. And because I guess they needed a vowel somewhere in there, they took the CO of coordinating. I don't know, don't ask me. And then reporting and budgeting. But we just need to know that POSCORB has to do with the role of the manager and what all of those things are. As you read through this article, I'd like you to think, is anything missing? So in 1937, this is what Gulick said was the role of the manager. He also agreed there should be division and coordination of work. That works well with Taylor, that works well with Weber, and that workers should only have one boss. That's also very much in line with Taylor and Weber. But these other things, one of the things I had a student a couple of years ago say, Gulick is not accounting for the fact that we as managers oftentimes have to get, quote, on the line. So if I'm supervising DPSS employees, sometimes I actually have to be the caseworker. Sometimes I have to take a caseload. So I'm not just planning and organizing, but I'm actually doing some frontline work as well. Did he account for that? So I'd like you to go through this as you read it, and again, as master's students, and those of you who are going to be creating new theories off of this, are things missing? Should POSCORB now be spelled differently, in your opinion? Are there things that he omitted that need to be added in there? And are there things that the modern day manager does or doesn't do that's actually in this list? So as you read through articles, we're no longer, as master's students, we're no longer here to just read something and regurgitate it. Read it and say, do you agree with it? Do you not agree with it? Have times changed? Have things changed? Technologies changed? And these, articles that were written almost 100 years ago, do they still apply? You are the next generation of theorists, so you're reading this not to be doing a book report, but you're reading this to say, what can I contribute and where can we go from here? Chester Barnard is the next one you'll be reading about. He talks about the functions of the executive. And when we think Barnard, we usually think communication, or what we call soft skills. One of the things with Barnard is he talks about, in some of his writings, he talks about the formal communication, which would be very Weberian, this kind of bureaucratic thing, that if we think about maybe law enforcement, and I might get these positions wrong, so forgive me, people in law enforcement. A captain tells the lieutenant tells the sergeant tells whoever, and communication comes down the chain. And then if I have something to say, if I'm an officer, I tell my sergeant tells the lieutenant tells the captain, whatever. I might have that wrong, but you know where I'm going with this. That communication moves up and down the chain. That's according to Max Weber. That is how it is or should be. Barnard is saying, yeah, we know that there's these formal avenues of communication, but he talked about concepts of informal avenues of communication. That, we really communicate when we're the proverbial around the water cooler. We really communicate when we go out to lunch together. We really communicate in our carpool on the way there. And if you're in a carpool or a van pool, and it's you and it's higher up people, that in this informal communication, there's a lot of power. And what he said is that if employees do not trust that management, I'm going to use the phrase, has their back, that management isn't going to protect them, then the informal communication takes hold even stronger. So if you think about issues that law enforcement has been facing, if law enforcement officers do not believe that the higher-ups or the mayor or the city government people are not going to be supportive of them when their lives are in danger, then they, as a group, will form this informal communication that's saying, we're not going to risk this, or we're not going to go over here, or we've got to protect ourselves because nobody else is taking care of us. So especially, according to Barnard, if there's distrust of the higher-ups, this informal communication will be so powerful. These people will bond together at lower levels. That'll be more powerful than any sort of formal communication coming down the chain. So as you read through that, keep that kind of informal communication or the soft skills in mind as you're going through Barnard. Merton's article, this one talks about, this is now 1940. So now this is a couple of decades after Weber in Germany wrote his article about the bureaucracy. And Merton is saying, all right, we've been trying this bureaucratic structure, versus that old mom and pop kind of thing. And the bureaucratic structure, it has its place, but there are times where rather than the bureaucracy actually making people accountable and being consistent and all of those things, that it can become an end to itself. So that the bureaucracy or this lack of flexibility turns the means into the end. Meaning, we're doing, I'm stamping this paper every week because that's what the bureaucracy tells me to do, but it's not really serving a purpose anymore. So he's saying we can lose sight of what really needs to be done because we're so caught up in what the bureaucracy is telling us to do, the steps that we have to do. So I've got a video here, and I want to make a note and a disclaimer that this is probably the most boring video I will ever have you watch. It's about 8 minutes long, but it's really good information. It's just so boring. So if you have to fold laundry in the next, couple of days, put this on in the background while you're folding laundry. The information is really good, but the video itself is probably not. So that's my disclaimer on this one. But I would maybe put that on, let it go if you're emptying the dishwasher or something like that, let it run. And then after that, then read Merton's article, and hopefully it will help you kind of pick out the main themes of that. Now it brings us up to the mid-1940s. So we've talked about how managers are supposed to manage, the role of the manager, how the organizations should be structured. And we're starting to change in the way of managers. And Barnard, bringing in a little bit about communication, brings us to 1946. Now Herbert Simon is talking about, well, we really can't just talk about the structure and managers and all of that without talking about how decisions get made. So whenever we think Herbert Simon, we think decision-making theory. So if you think, Wilson, you think the dichotomy. If you think Taylor, we should be thinking about efficiency. When we think about Weber, we're thinking structure. Barnard, we're thinking soft skills or communication. Simon, we're thinking decision-making. So he had this concept of what he called bounded rationality, and this is a takeoff of the old economic theory called rational choice theory. And rational choice says I'm going to look at all available options and I'm going to select the one that will maximize my own self-interest, or maximize utility is the technical word. So I am going to, if I'm a city council member, we hope this is not true, if I'm a city council member, I will look at all available options that are put before me, and I will select the option that will maximize my own self-interest, not what's best necessarily for the people. Let's assume that is not true. But if I'm going to invest, in a house, I'm going to look at all available houses and I'm going to select the one that will maximize my own self-interest. That doesn't necessarily have to mean the one that will give you the biggest return on investment. Maybe your own self-interest has to do with a loving home and, a place big enough to hold the family, whatever it is. That was rational choice. Simon came along in 1946 and said, well, and he's actually, this video that I'll have you watch, if you listen carefully in the beginning, he's going to say he's working off of Barnard's work. That was just a few years earlier. So all of these theorists kind of, worked in tandem as we move through time. So he's saying, I don't know anybody. None of my friends ever look at all available options and calculate the one that's going to maximize their own self-interest. They don't, it isn't done that way. That's not in reality how decisions are made. We're going to look at a couple of things and pick an okay one. So if you go to the market and you're going to buy green beans, are you going to look at the label and all ingredients and assess everything about every green bean and the quantity and the price and all that? Or are you just going to pick Del Monte because that's what you always get, or Green Giant because that's what you always get, or it's on sale, it's fine. So the saying, excuse me, for Simon is, I'm not looking for, as an individual, I'm not looking for the sharpest needle in a haystack. I'm not going to go through there and try to find the sharpest needle in there. I'm going to find the needle that sews what I need it to sew. Meaning it's good enough. Okay, this can of green beans, it's fine. It's on sale, it's good enough. So the concept of, so rather than rational choice, which was the original theory from the 1700s, this economic theory, he's saying it's really bounded rationality. There's limits on rational choice. And this concept of I'm choosing the best one given whatever I'm going to look at, he calls satisficing. Meaning, yeah, it's good enough. It's, I'm looking at some options and this one's fine. If you're going to buy a new car, you might look at Consumer Reports, you might read some reviews, ask your neighbors, you might look at Toyota and, I don't know, Honda, whatever your brands are, but you're probably not going to test drive every single car on the market. You're probably not going to look at everything. You're going to pick, narrow it down to a couple, bounded, and then pick a fairly rational decision based on whatever is going to, maximize your own self-interest or maximize your utility. So he's saying in order to talk about organizations, we need to talk about decision making. This video I would like you to watch. Again, it's kind of a boring video, but the cool thing about it is it's actually Herbert Simon speaking and telling you about his theory, which if again, he is not a terribly dynamic person, but it's kind of a slice of history. It's actually a video, it was just on YouTube that I found. It was actually, from what I can hear from other students, it was actually, it's subtitled in I guess he was in Brazil somewhere, and so it's all subtitled, but he's speaking in English. It's just subtitled for them. So if you can read, a dialect from Brazil, then you could just read it, or you could just listen to him speak English. It's fine. But it's kind of interesting little slice of life. And again, hearing how he was working off of Barnard's work. And the articles we're having you read are kind of the tip of the iceberg. If you are looking maybe for research about decision-making theory, you can go deep into Simon. Communication, you can go deep into Barnard. Efficiency, Taylor wrote a lot of different books and articles. So we're having you get a taste of all of these, kind of a sample pack of all of these, but there's a lot more depth if any of these you find interesting. All right, that brings us to 1959. We're now in another decision-making theory. So when I think decision-making theory, I should think Simon and Lindblom. Again, I can't emphasize enough, you've got to be making some flashcards or use, what was that thing, a Quizlet on your iPhone or your smartphone. But you've got to start, these names and these concepts and dates have to be kind of popping into your head. Lindblom, again, another decision-making theory, and it's called the science of muddling through. And this is incrementalism, kind of one step at a time. So the saying is policy change, especially policy, is evolutionary, not revolutionary. So we don't make these big changes. So as opposed to Simon, who's saying, I'm going to look at all, a couple of options, I'm going to pick the best one, given my limitations here. Lindblom is saying, no, it really isn't done that way. Changes are made slowly and changes are made incrementally. So years ago, when my sister had her first child, the first of 4, by the way, she had her first child, and the baby would have a pacifier. I don't know if people still use this. Okay, so a little pacifier in her mouth. And if that pacifier dropped on the ground, what do you think we had to do? Of course, we had to boil it and sterilize it before we could ever give it back to the baby. Now, fast forward a few years, my sister had 4 children in about 5 years. So these were kind of one after the other. By the time the 4th kid was born and now has her own pacifier, and there's these other 5 or other 4 kids that are, under 5 years old or whatever. When kid number 4's pacifier dropped on the ground, what do you think we did? Did we boil it? We did not. You kind of, put it on, wiped it on your jeans and gave it back to the kid. All right. So, but that was not, okay, I am going to, if a pacifier drops on the ground, I am going to boil it and sterilize it and give it back to my child. And then day 2, I am going to choose not to do that. I am going to do this, just give it back. That's not how it happened. It was incrementally. Day after day, month after month, year after year, that small changes get made and we change how we do things, how we think of things. So if you're seeing patterns either in policy or in how government moves, and you're seeing this incrementalism, then you're on kind of a Lindblom type of theory. If you're saying, no, people are going to look at their options and make an okay decision, now that's kind of a model of, not Chester Barnard, Herbert Simon. So start getting these, and your theories, however you think really, when you look at a situation at work, how do you think it operates? Is it a little more Lindblom-like or a little more Simon-like? Is it a little more something else? And you're going to start thinking about, do you agree with these theories? Do you disagree with these theories? But what I don't want you to do is repeat their theories, because I know their theories. So when you guys are writing to me, please don't write like it's a book report. That's the tendency at this stage. Most of you, this is your first master's class. You're going to want to tell me exactly what Lindblom says. I know what he said. What I want to know is, do you agree with it? So you're going to take his theory, be able to tell me, so Lindblom has this concept of incrementalism, for example, and then you can give me an example of when it works. However, and then give me an example of when it doesn't work. What I'm looking for is the application, what they call moving theory to practice. That's at a master's level, and that's what we're really striving for here. All right, there's some PowerPoint files up there. One is a quick overview of the authors, so kind of a little cheat sheet that might help you with flashcards and things like that. It's just notes only. There's also a guest lecture on decision making that you might find interesting. And then I put the Barnard article up there in case it's not in your book. It's probably better if it's in your book because it's all in one place, but otherwise this might help. All right, so we need a PowerPoint presentation due this week. And this is not recorded. This is just the raw PowerPoint file. And what I want you to do on this one, remember, I'm looking for more graphics and less verbiage. I want you to visually illustrate your concepts here. So analyze and illustrate one author presented this week that you relate to and you believe is most significantly influences your beliefs in public administration. So look at all of them. Which one are you kind of, this is really influencing or relates to how I believe in public administration? So your first slide, title of the presentation, that kind of stuff. Give me an overview, next slide, of what will be covered. Then a summary of the theory. Again, please do not give me, a lot of verbiage. Just kind of give me an image, a picture of what kind of encapsulates for you a summary of the theory, and then you can give me a couple of words or bullets, but much more graphic than anything else. Evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of the theory. So when does it work? When doesn't it work? And this could be one slide, two slides, it doesn't matter. Show me a real life example that illustrates the theory. Again, the verbiage is just a few bullets to kind of tell me what if you've ever seen like Star magazine or some of those things that you can see when you're getting your hair done, where you've got like pictures of Brad and Angelina and then like, a sentence under it. And so you're really just looking at pictures with the sentences kind of telling the story. That's more of what I'm looking for here. Star magazine. Yes, that's what we do at a master's level. With the assumption that once your narration comes, your narration will pick it up from there. So again, do not do as I do. I put a lot of verbiage on my slides because some people will use this to work off of for their assignments and stuff. But don't do this. Don't do what I do. And then does the theory, as you understand it, have any religious or spiritual implications, and why or why not on that one? And then give me a slide of references, please. All right, this week we're going to start working on a lit review, just kind of a mini lit review. This one's due on Saturday. So I would do the PowerPoint assignment first, and then construct this kind of micro lit review is what it's being called. So what I want you to do is briefly introduce the political climate of the 1930s and 1950s. You're going to have to do some outside research on this. As a master's student, please, please, please do not ever use Wikipedia. Do not use an encyclopedia, and don't use a dictionary. That's not what we do. If you're looking for this type of information, you can use, articles. You can use other websites that are not biased. You don't want to go off on one way or another. Just something that you can trust. Political climate, 1930s to 1950s, and then provide a general overview of 3 of the 5 authors presented this week. Now, even in this overview, what I don't want you to do is tell me what they said. I know what they said. So I want you to give me your overview. So if you went to a movie last weekend, and you're going to, let's say 5 of you went to the movies last weekend, saw the same movie. And if I said, what was the movie about? Each one of you would tell me what that movie's about differently. You would focus on different things. And then if I said, well, is that movie like anybody else? I'm not getting it. Like, what other movie might it be like that I've seen? Or what was that actress like? Who is she like that I might know? You're going to be relating it to things. So when you're providing the overview of your 3 authors, what I want you to do is, let's say, and I'm making this up, a sentence on the theory, but really about your interpretation of it and apply it to something in real life. So this is really getting into the depth of you using the theory, using theories together in kind of a real world situation. So what I do not want here, please, is a book report. Wilson in 1887 wrote this, and it says this, and it says that. I know that. That's good undergrad writing. Master's level, you're now creating new. You're interpreting. You're going beyond that. Papers are to be written with a non-PA audience in mind. So break down the concepts into simple, clear ideas. So if you're going to explain Gulick to a high school class, how would you explain it? Again, don't read them Gulick. They could read it themselves. But it's your job to teach this information. What is Barnard saying? Give me examples. So in this section, it's you teaching us about the authors and making the material come to life. So, all right, on this lit review, just 2 or 3 pages of sheer perfection. That's all I want. No pressure at all. All right, last thing. I don't know if I've said this before, but I used to teach at Cal State Long Beach for many years. And every day I'd go to class, and I'd have office hours usually before class, and there'd be lines of students because we were in these old 1960s buildings that were horrible with these metal desks. But there'd be people in the hallway and tile floors, and they would just be sitting on the floor with their books and their laptops and all of that, waiting to get into any of the professors for office hours. But I always had people every week talking to students, and I'm learning from them, and we're talking about ideas. In this online format, I don't get that all the time, but I love that. So I'm here to talk to you. So if you're getting trapped on something or you want to run an idea by me, let me know and we'll set up a WebEx. We could do it live face-to-face, or we could do it live face-to-face. If you want to come to the office, that's perfectly fine. Or we could do it face-to-face but using technology, or we could just talk on the phone. You can email me at any time, but I'm here to work with you. And if you have ideas for different projects, let me know. That just because we're at a distance doesn't mean we don't have the same, relationship. It's not that we can't still work together. So if you want to talk, you just let me know and we'll set up a time. And I look forward to talking to everybody and reading your wonderful papers. And in the meantime, everybody have a very blessed week, and I look forward to hearing from you soon.